Well, hello plant lovers. It is Matthew in Melbourne, welcoming you to my channel. Thank you for finding me in this crowded YouTube world of orchid videos. Now, I post every week on a Friday. I am a rank amateur and I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia, without any help from greenhouses, humidifiers, or grow lights. So plant lovers, if that sounds like your conditions, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday, as I said, amateur ramblings, but might help you untangle your orchid journey. And I will say, plant lovers, that perhaps at the beginning or really at any point in your orchid journey, light is quite an issue. What does bright indirect light mean? What does indirect light mean? What does shade mean? And what does direct light mean? So plant lovers, this is my epic "What light does my orchid need" video. But really what it is, I am gonna take you through my growing areas and just describe to you the light that I've got and the type of things that grow in it and what that sort of means in terms of a definition to help you understand perhaps where to put orchids in your particular climate and environment to make them thrive. Now, all of these things are so subjective because it depends where you are, depends how you grow, it depends what seasonality you have. The further north you get in the northern hemisphere, of course, the shorter the days are in winter until there's none. The more equatorial regions, of course, equal day and night throughout the year. So it really depends where you are. I am in the southern hemisphere, obviously, and our winters, although obviously the days are shorter, they're not that short. So we still have quite a good amount of hours of sunlight here in Melbourne. So all of these things can affect what your plant will do. And as I don't use any grow lights or artificial lighting, very hard for me to talk to that. So I won't, because I don't know anything about using grow lights and the type of orchids that respond to it and what they need. So this is really just my experience in my environment, and then it might help you figure out what to do with your orchids. So what we're going to do is go for a little walking adventure. But before we do that, what I would say first thing is research your plant. Find out where it's from. Now, this one is a species plant and it's called Bifrenaria aureofolva. And beautiful, beautiful plant. Now, if you go to a site called orchidspecies.com, you will find this plant and it will describe to you where the plant comes from and what its conditions are and what sort of light it needs. So if you're a bit unsure, you can then Google that area. So if it says misty high altitude forests in the Andes, just Google that, see what they look like. Try and get a sense of what the natural light conditions for that plant are. Uh, if a plant is described as coming from southern Yunnan province in South China, which is where lots of plants have emerged from, just Google forest, southern Yunnan, China, see what pops up, have a little look. So if a forest is evergreen, then the plant's going to get pretty continuous, consistent light all year. If the forest is deciduous, it's going to get more light in winter. And if it's a epiphyte, it will be in the tree. So it's going to get, as the tree's moving, it's going to get dappled light. And again, it could be deciduous or not. If the plant is a lithophyte and it's growing at floor level, then that's going to change the light it gets as well. And all of those different factors. So first thing I would do, research your plant, try and find out as much as you can. Orchidspecies.com is great to understand species orchids. Then if you've got a hybrid plant, you can go to orchidroots.com, type in the name of your hybrid, and it will ultimately tell you what the ancestor species are for that plant. And then you can go back to orchidspecies.com, find them out, Google them, and see what the conditions might look like. So first thing I would try to do, know where it comes from, and then try and figure out how you can replicate that in your own growing environment. But perhaps with no further ado, we should get up and get out of here. Now, talking of light, there we are. There's my ring light, and there's a window there. That is east facing, so that gives me morning light. So this for me is not a great orchid room, but it's a great filming room because the light's manageable. So not much to see in here, but let's go out and I'll show you some other types of light. Okay, first stop is the landing. Now here is my fabulous north-facing window. Now I'm in the southern hemisphere, so of course that's where the light comes from. In the northern hemisphere, it will be a south-facing window. So this is where I grow here quite a lot of my orchids because this plant lovers, is bright indirect light. So there's the window, and I would say it's about 4 meters from the light to the window. Actually, at this spot, I grow Bulbophyllum Elizabethan Buckleberry, which really loves it there. There are some Oncidium alliance hybrids. What else do I have here? There's a few dendrobiums, there's some paphiopedilums, so things that want bright indirect light basically. In winter, it's a little brighter up here because the sun is lower, so it's even brighter. So actually in summer, it's a little more diffused. And downstairs, which we'll go to in a minute, is actually brighter in winter. So I would say this is bright indirect light, and then it just changes with the season. And then over here, I also have some things growing, and that is pretty consistently bright indirect light. And there I have some, again, some Oncidium hybrid types and a few other things, all of which manage to flower. So I would say this is bright indirect light. And what you can see on the window is that it's sort of got bubble glass. So it's not direct light coming through. So that's already diffusing it quite a bit more. A similar effect would be if you had, say, a very fine curtain or a very fine blind over the window that is just filtering the light a little bit more. So bright indirect light. Okay, let's go down the stairs, and we're once again at this very wonderful north-facing window, and let's look at what we've got here. Now here I have got catasetum type of orchids. Now this window basically gets sunlight throughout the year because it's north facing and it's actually relatively low. So even though the winter sun is lower, it still hits this window ledge, and in summer it still hits it. So at this point we're so close to the glass, it doesn't matter whether it's winter or summer. As long as the day is sunny, it gets light, and even if it's not, it's still getting bright light. But as you can see, it is very direct light. It's not direct sunlight because we still have this sort of funny texture on the glass. So again, it would be the effect you'd have of a net curtain. But it is very, very strong light, and not that many orchids want it, but some do. And catasetum certainly do, although I've never got one to flower, so maybe I'm wrong with that. But if I was trying to grow cattleyas, for example, inside, this will be a great spot to do it. And the wonderful Rachel at Gardening Duensa in Ireland grows her cattleyas on a windowsill. In fact, she's published a book about it called Windowsill Growing, I think. I'll put a link to her channel and you can find out how she grows her cattleyas. So this would be the brightest spot in the house for me to grow anything. So the plants are very close to the window. Now, if I was in a space where I could move things, further across, I can't because this is the landing. About a meter in would be quite different. That's about 2.5 feet. The light there will be different again. So quite subtle changes can make quite a difference to how the plant responds. So once again, to know what plant likes bright direct light, you need to go through those sort of research processes and just see how the species ancestors of the plant are described in terms of their light needs. But there we go, bright direct light. Okay, let us come down to the bottom of the stairs. So that is the same window there, but now we are deeper into the house. And then as you can see, great spot for begonias actually, and other such luxuriant things. But in winter, because the sun is lower, it actually filters down here much more. So this is a great spot for me to have bright indirect light in winter. So when I'm moving things inside from outside, so a lot of oncidiums, this is the spot where I put them. Also, paphiopedilums I will put here, the ones that like brighter light. They tend to be the ones with sort of plainer green leaves, not the speckled ones. So this, and I'll just try and see if I can show you even more. There we are. You see? Bright indirect light. It is late summer now, so it is a little, not darker, but it's not as bright, weirdly, in summer as it is in winter, because in winter the light's lower and it penetrates deeper into the house. So bear in mind the seasonal changes in your space, because it won't be the same all the year unless you live in the equatorial band of the globe where the sun is always consistent. Okay, let's go outside to my cymbidium bed and just have a look at the light out there. So these plants are outside all year, and cymbidiums like dappled light because they are a understory plant mostly. I mean, some aren't, but we're talking about the ones I grow, which are the sort of Himalayan high altitude ones. So if we squat down here, there are all my cymbidiums, and they are growing with bromeliads. And what you can see there is a carport roof, but also silver birch trees, and that is north there. So this I would be calling dappled light. In winter, the sun's lower, the trees have no leaves, and so more light dapples down onto these cymbidiums. In summer, the light's a little higher, but it's longer and more intense, and it's just filtered a little bit more, which is great because that direction is west. And here in Melbourne particularly, the western sun is vicious, and western wind can be really hard too. Not great for many plants. So it's wonderful that I've got that sort of diffused little band of deciduous trees there, which are going to let in more light in winter and shelter the whole spot a little bit more in summer. So this, I would say, is dappled light, and a lot of orchids love that. And if you're growing plants outside like me, finding a spot where you can be fairly consistent with this is a great thing to do. Now, many growers in Australia just have their orchids outside under trees. So it does depend, is it deciduous tree or is it not a deciduous tree? Eucalypts have quite an open canopy, so it's not that dense, so that can be quite good because it's really quite dappled light. Depends though, if it's a shade loving plant, that might be too bright. But I do know a lot of growers in Melbourne that grow cymbidiums and zygopetalums underneath the shade of a eucalypt tree because it's consistent all year, quite dappled. The only difference being, of course, in winter the light is lower, so it penetrates sort of deeper under the canopy of those trees. So you might get brighter light in winter, which is not a bad thing because many plants, including Australian dendrobiums and sarcochyllus, will want a bit of a brighter light opportunity in winter. So that can be a great place to put them, where the light penetration in winter is stronger just because of the nature of the earth and its seasonality. Okay, leaving the wonderful cymbidium bed, we'll go out to the other side of the house to where I grow other orchids and just see what they're living their best life in. All right, now there is our dining table. That is a south-facing window, which in the northern hemisphere would be great, but in the southern hemisphere, it's dark, gets no light whatsoever. But what I do put on that table is orchids in bloom for us to look at and enjoy, but they don't get any natural light really. It's just very diffused or it's artificial light. So then we come outside to where I grow many of my orchids. And there we are. Quick panorama. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. That's a begonia. It is tuberous begonia season here in Melbourne. Now, the sun has gone in, so this is not perhaps the best way to describe this to you, but if you look up there, I have got a polycarbonate roof, which is diffused. So I'd say maybe 20-25% diffusion up there. So the same conditions perhaps if you've whitewashed the roof of your greenhouse. So that already adds a layer of filtering. So really then for me, it's a question of the aspect. So this fence along here is the north facing side of the house. So that's where all the best light comes from. And then I've got that diffused polycarbonate above. So in principle, that should be really great, except there are these evergreen magnolia trees there. They are a form called Magnolia grandiflora little gem. So it has big, thick, leathery leaves, which aren't deciduous. So it's kind of a bit of a block against all my orchids. But here I have hanging things that get morning light. So that direction there is east. So I get morning light quite early in the morning, very early in summer, less early in winter, and it penetrates relatively deep into the space. And so what I have here are things that are shade loving. So I have lots of Masdevallia and Maxillaria, and I have my Bifrenaria aureofolva here, hangs on that little wire there, but it's inside at the moment because it's in bloom. So these orchids will get direct light in the morning, but it's very early in the morning, so it's very gentle. And then as the sun passes over, I have this barrier of evergreen trees and that polycarbonate roof, which filters the light even more. So it's not super. So finding things that really thrive here can be a little bit tricky. So again, understanding what all the sort of the micro elements are in your environment are very important because they will play quite a substantial effect on the play of light and what things are going to thrive in that particular condition. And again, it will change, particularly in a climate like mine, seasonally. So the sun is lower in winter and doesn't get quite as high on the horizon, so it doesn't get as far, so it's not as high. So this part of the roof actually doesn't give me much filtered light because the sun's lower. Anyway, oh look, the sun's come out and you can see how the light is filtering into this part of my grow space. Turning around, there's the north, there's the beautiful light coming in. Let's go to the other side. Now here, this little spot tends to always get really bright light, both winter and summer. It's just a fluke of the positioning. So this is a good spot for cattleyas for me. So interestingly, just like a foot or two that way, much darker. But this little spot here is just much brighter all year. So I've got some dendrobiums. This is Dendrobium moniliforme, the variegated form, and this is a cattleya that I've made many videos about. It's bloomed for me. It was a seedling. I dropped it. I don't like the flower. Now here I have a table which is covered in all sorts of different things. Now, once again, this spot, for some magic reason, most of the year gets really great, bright, indirect light. And this is what we're calling this light, bright, indirect light, because we've got the roof protecting it, but it's really quite bright. And if you put your hand there, you'll see a little bit of shadow. Perfect conditions for many orchids. So I have oncidiums here, some dendrobiums, I have some sarcochyllus. This is Sarcochyllus hartmanii, that's where it lives, and they all bloom brilliantly. And so in winter, if I want a plant to have more light and it's in a spot that isn't quite so light, I will move it to this table. All right, let's penetrate deeper into the jungle. Now we're going to the southern side, and as you can see, very bright at the moment because it's late summer and it's gorgeous light. So this is actually the brightest part of my whole grow space. So this is where I have anything that wants bright indirect light. So that would be things like cattleyas. Oh, some dendrobiums want bright indirect light. This is Hancockii, which blooms for me really well. Lalias love this type of light as well. And I'm experimenting with some vandas here. This was a seedling vanda and I experiment with it inside and outside. Inside in winter, outside in summer. And it's doing quite well actually. Let's remove that dead leaf. I would say this is pretty similar to the light on the landing, the north facing window for me, if perhaps a little brighter. The difference, of course, out here is that it's outside, so it's breezier, there's natural humidity. It's a really great space, but it's not that big. So I cram everything into this little square meterage and hang it as high as I can, because throughout the year, it is one of the brightest spots. And so plants that need that consistent type of light really have to juggle to get their place here. And yet, once again, we just swing around to the other side. Let me try and find a good angle for you. There you go, crouching beneath all the plants. So just here, which is about 2 feet away, it's much shadier. So this is where I am growing things like Coleogene and Stanhopea. So I would say this is indirect light. So it's very close to that bright area, but it's just not as bright. And so you can see that I am more in shade. So the plant is more in shade, whereas just that way, I was in much more direct light. So there we go, just one side, literally the other side of an aisle to the other, and it's completely different light, and I'm able to grow completely different things. And that's basically the same. So down there, I've got Coleogenes and Dendrobium Victoria Reginae lives over there. So we've still got the benefit, if you can see, of that polycarbonate roof, but just because of the way the house is aligned and the way the seasonality of the sun is, this side is always a little bit shadier and cooler. And that is a very useful thing to have. Now, the last type of light, plant lovers, is direct sun. Now, there aren't that many plants that are going to love that. And there's direct sun all day, and then there's direct sun in the morning and direct sun in the afternoon. So it really depends. But if you look over there, you can see that I have got plants growing over there, none of which are orchids except one. And let's see if we can find our way over there for me to show you which one I have growing in direct sun. This is a grammatophyllum. Why have I bought it? It's a tropical orchid. It's massive. I bought it in the early days of my orchid career, and yeah, really stupid of me. However, it does like direct light. So this spot, you can just see the leaves are still just getting the sun. So we've just passed, it's sort of early afternoon now. The light's moved over, but for most of the morning, this plant gets direct sunlight and then bright indirect light for the rest of the day. And it puts up new growths for me. And it was a seedling when I bought it. I mean, who knows? Is that ever going to amount to anything? I don't know, but it's reasonably healthy. I water it every day. I feed it much more often than anything else. And there it is. So some things, so particularly certain tropical orchids, will want direct sunlight. Now, an orchid that grows at a high altitude in a misty, beautiful forest in Colombia or Peru or the Himalaya, it might be in direct light, but it's protected by all the constant cloud cover and humidity. So it's a very different type of light that it's getting. So once again, you need to really Google where the plant comes from. Just Google the area and just see, and you will see that this is growing in really bright, direct tropical light in the sort of botanic gardens and things that you'll find it growing in. So a really stupid thing for me to have bought. But you know what? It's still loving life and growing for me, and it's really become quite massive since I bought it from the original seedling. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to keep giving it a go. So what I do is I move it inside to that top part of the landing in winter where it gets bright indirect light, which is not great for it because it wants direct light. And then I bring it out the minute that the winter minimum temperatures are a bit warmer. I bring it out here and it gets direct light. Now I've made the mistake of having other things growing here. I put some Lalias here and they got really burnt from the morning sun. So they want bright indirect light, and it depends how you've sort of acclimatized the plant. So that's another important thing to remember, that some things you can acclimatize and they'll just gradually move it closer to the spot that you want it to, build up its resistance to the light and see what happens. So if I've been growing this in shade and then suddenly put it in bright direct light, although that's what the plant wants, it would just take a little bit of time to get used to it. So bear that in mind. I have made that mistake, moving things too quickly and really burnt them. And then you're stuck with the damaged leaves forever. All right, and then low light. So what you can see here, so this is just below that area above me where I'm growing Coleogenes and Stanhopea. And down here, there is not that much light. So there are certain things that I grow here which thrive, one of which being Odontoglossum pulchellum, which does not want very strong light and flowers beautifully, has the most beautiful white fragrant flowers. So it really depends though, because light is one of those key elements that can make or break an orchid in terms of its capacity to flower. So generally having the wrong light isn't going to kill it unless it's in direct light, of course, and direct sunlight, and that can kill a plant because it will burn. But generally, if a plant's just in the wrong light, it's not going to bloom for you, and it might grow a little bit leggy if it's in too darker spots, and it just won't look its best. So trying to find the best spot for it is really important. But generally, it's not going to kill the plant. I think not understanding the watering, you're more likely to kill a plant than the light. But quite often, the reason why a plant isn't flowering for you is because it is in the wrong light, and generally it's not getting enough light. That would be my rule of thumb. So there we are, plant lovers. That is my What is Light 101. We are all blinded by the light. Hopefully we're not, because it's really crucial to figure out what works for you and what your orchid's like. And as you can see from my environment, which is an indoor-outdoor one, there are many different types of light that I've got. So just observe the season, just observe where the shadows fall. If things are flowering in their position, then they're happy. If things aren't, just move them. And sometimes it can be a matter of 30 centimeters, a foot difference, closer or further away from the light, that can make all the difference to make something bloom. That has certainly been my case. And if something is described as being a low light plant, don't go too shady to start with. Just give it, I would say, indirect light and just see what happens. Some leaves will respond very quickly. If they're getting too much light, they will get brown spots and just not look healthy. Some plants are actually more limey green when they're getting the right light, which is kind of counterintuitive. And some things will be much darker and lusher than they should be if they're not getting enough light. So it can be a little confusing. Good idea is just to research the plant, try and find out where it comes from, how that light is described, and then see if you can find a spot in your growing areas that match it or replicate it as close as you can. And the moral of the story, as we said, is if a plant is not flowering, I would say 10 out of 10, A, it's not old enough to bloom, shouldn't be allowed out. Secondly, it probably isn't getting enough light. So that would be what I would try if you're having a little bit of an issue with a non-flowering plant. So there we are, plant lovers. I hope you've loved our Light Escapade 101. It's very personal, it's very subjective, it really depends what's going on, but I hope this has given you some understanding of what I think my conditions are and when I'm describing like what it means in the context of my growing space. Of course, it's all going to change because we're moving this year and I have to figure out the whole thing all over again, and that might take another year. Anyway, plant lovers, thank you for watching. I hope wherever you are, all is well in the world. Who knows what we're doing next week, but hit subscribe and you will find out because my missive pops into the ether every Friday, and I look forward to seeing you next week.